the curtains and see what's really twerking. Televised lies and frequencies of confusion. We can't win for losing. Our grip on reality, infatuated with temporal things we see that pass away with the user. Eventually, look beyond the surface. When will you part back the curtains of your darkened minds to seek truth and righteousness? 'Cause we're running out of time. Floods, earthquakes, fires, droughts, and wars. AIDS, Ebola, West Nile, hepatitis, and SARS. Why no man take these things to heart? 'Cause the kings of the earth are mad and know not peace. Truth falls in the streets 'cause no one seeks beyond the surface. If you dare to be so bold, read about the God of Israel and the people he chose. All that glitters ain't gold. Look deep beyond the surface. Follow the light, it's worth it. It leads to something. Yahweh of hosts is his name. The source of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Yah.
Peace be unto you. My name is Tamar Yisrael, and you're watching Beyond the Surface. Have you ever wondered why wars and violence ravage the earth? Why do floods, earthquakes, drought, and wildfires kill thousands of people each year, causing damage to property in the millions? Why do homelessness, poverty, and disease exist amidst a society of opulence and great wealth? To find out the answers to these troubling questions, you must begin to look beyond the surface. What you see is not the truth. This world is a great illusion crafted by the master deceiver, Lucifer, the prince of darkness. In order to understand this great mystery, you must begin to open the third eye, the eye of divine consciousness. And this eye can only be opened by Yahweh, our Heavenly Father. Only then will you truly understand why there is so much trouble in the world. Beyond the Surface is a documentary formatted program designed to explore topics of interest regarding the end-time scenario, the New Age movement, technology and business and finance, science, ancient history, and who we are as a nation of people through narration, music, and graphics. We'll end the program with a segment called The Watchman that will warn you of evil and give you understanding of righteousness and truth. We hope you enjoy Beyond the Surface, so sit back and enjoy the program.
The Pagan Origins of Thanksgiving, narrated by Johanna Bat Yisrael. Thanksgiving is one of the most unassumingly pagan holidays that exist. On the surface, it seems to be a non-religious, until one begins to question this holiday's history, trappings, and traditions. It is wrapped in the guise of American patriotism and blended with a large helping of family bonding. This is one of the main reasons that Thanksgiving is the most celebrated holiday in America. There is more travel taking place for this holiday than any other holiday of the year. The common history that we are given about Thanksgiving includes the happy bond between the immigrant pilgrims and the indigenous peoples that came to be known as the Indians. The first official occurrence of Thanksgiving in America was said to have taken place in 1621. The legend of this fable tells of the pilgrims feeling indebted to the Indians for their kindness and sharing of knowledge that allowed them to survive the harsh winter in the new land. This is said to have led to the annual feasting on corn and fowl and dessert that was later called Thanksgiving. This, however, was not the story that actually happened. The Pilgrims should have been ever indebted to the indigenous peoples, but that was not the case. Actually, in 1620, by the time the Mayflower landed with Puritan exiles, most of the native peoples had already been killed off in large numbers, and some taken as slaves by an earlier British expedition. The Mayflower Puritans settled near their destroyed village and met one lone villager remaining alive. He had spent the last few years as a slave to the English and the Spanish in Europe. This lone Indian villager named Squanto was actually the one that taught them how to survive and negotiated peace with the other local Indian tribes. This allowed the Puritans to live unharmed for almost 2 decades amongst the other local Indian tribes that also helped them. After this first fruitful year, the Puritans held a feast to celebrate their good fortune. It was not called Thanksgiving. They did not even invite the Indians. They invited only the chief of the local tribe. It was he, at the displeasure of the Puritans, that invited 90 of his fellow tribesmen. This was the infamous Great Feast that is celebrated today. Just under 2 decades later, these same supposedly grateful Puritans went on to burn to death some 700 local Indians. Later in 1641, the Dutch governor of Manhattan offered the first scalp bounty. The government paid 20 shillings bounty for every Indian scalp, the 40 shillings for every prisoner who could be sold into slavery. Although the practice of scalping is thought to have been of Indian origin, it was actually the Pilgrims that started this practice. It was only later that the Indians, in retaliation, returned the favor. Even though this information is disturbing, this is not the reason that this holiday is pagan. It is pagan because its practice is connected to the worshiping of false gods. And of course, this breaks commandment number 1 of the 10 Commandments, and that's a very big no-no. Even if Americans desire to hold on to this holiday's fabled version instead of the truth and call it a patriotic day, the next question should be, if this holiday is American-born, then why is it celebrated in various nations throughout the world? Thanksgiving is not a patriotic day of thanks. Thanksgiving is a harvest festival that was honored hundreds of years before America was even discovered, in honor of ancient pagan gods. This pagan festival was simply brought with the immigrants into this country from their various native homelands. Many of these countries from which the immigrants came are still celebrating this festival. In Germany, Thanksgiving is an official major holiday. It is called Erntedag, which literally means Harvest Thanksgiving Day. The harvest festivals are celebrated in churches and marketplaces, in homes and dance halls. This harvest celebration is for the harvest of locally grown produce, ranging from grapes to grain. It is traditionally celebrated in early October, on the Sunday after the full moon that occurs nearest to the autumnal equinox. In America, that moon is known as the harvest moon. This pagan holiday shows honor to their harvest gods. Grain is brought into barns on big wagons, pulled by decorated oxen, and on top of the wagons there are sheaves of grain that are bound in the form of a figure, animal, or human. This design was brought here to America in the form of the scarecrow. This is why during the autumn months, in the grocery stores, in the produce section, you can most often view a scarecrow hanging. This represents their harvest gods overlooking their crops. This time, not in the fields of a cold European country, but in our modern version, the produce aisle of your local food store. Another present-day pagan harvest festival that is still celebrated is called Chung Chui by the ancient Chinese. This harvest moon festival, as it is called, is still one of the most widely celebrated festivals for Chinese anywhere in the world. The The Harvest Moon Festival, like American Thanksgiving, is celebrated with an extended family and is focused around a large meal that is prepared for all the members of the family. It is held in September or October. It occurs on the full moon after the autumnal equinox. This day is fabled by the Chinese to be the birthday of the moon, and special cakes are made and stamped with this picture of a rabbit. Rabbits are notoriously represented throughout history for fertility. The families ate a Thanksgiving meal and feasted on a roasted pig, harvested fruits, and the special cakes. What we must always remember is that just like it is told to us in the Scriptures, there is nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1:9.
The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun.
All the holidays that we presently celebrate are the remaining pagan feasts from ancient times. These pagan feasts were set to honor and worship pagan gods and goddesses. From one ancient dynasty to another, newer dynasties not only conquered the previous one's land, riches, and cities, but also their deities. All that's ever changed is the names of the cities, the buildings, and the names of their gods. There is no coincidence that time after time you will find in ancient times that one culture's gods have the same characteristics and are celebrated in the same fashion that the previous culture celebrated. Let's look at the southern European countries. We can find the same type of worship of harvest gods. In the ancient civilization of Greece, the goddess of grains, Demeter, was celebrated during their autumnal harvest festival called Themysphora. She was thanked for the year's harvest with feasting, family, and thanksgiving. In ancient Rome, the goddess Ceres was worshipped during their festival called Cerealia. The word cereal comes from her name, Ceres. Remember, she was their grain god. Cereal comes from grain. This festival was held each year in October, and the first fruits of the harvest and pigs were offered to this pagan deity. The celebration of Ceres in ancient Rome included much of the same festivities as Americans' modern-day Thanksgiving. The pagan festival of Cerealia focused around the great feast of Thanksgiving, as does modern Thanksgiving. Cerealia festivals included large parades and their spectators, as does the American Macy's version of Thanksgiving Day Parade, and its national broadcast to even the smallest of American cities and towns. The pagan Cerealia included great games and sports as a major part of honoring the great goddess Ceres. Celebrating modern-day Thanksgiving wouldn't be the same without the annual Thanksgiving Day football game, which is truly as much a part of Thanksgiving as is the cranberry sauce and the holiday table cornucopias. Speaking of the symbol of Thanksgiving, cornucopias, this holiday table decoration was not chosen by accident to represent this festival. The cornucopia is a Latin term originating from two words, cornu, meaning horn, copia, meaning plenty. This horn of plenty is usually shown overflowing with nuts and fruit. We are told that it symbolizes prosperity or abundance. In Greek mythology, this horn belongs to a goat cared for by the infant pagan god Zeus. This fable tells us that the infant Zeus accidentally broke off one of the horns from the goat's head. As the fable continues, Zeus, in apology, offered that the possessor of this horn would receive from within this horn whatever his owner wished for. Because of this, the cornucopia came to symbolize the unasked gifts from the gods. The cornucopia has been used as an emblem of many pagan deities, including Copia, the Roman goddess of wealth and plenty who carries the cornucopia, Justia, the Roman goddess of justice, Spes, the Roman goddess of hope, Anos, the Roman deity of morality and military honor, and many others. Even in masonry, the cornucopia even finds a place. It symbolizes peace, plenty, and joy. So remember the cornucopia's history before you add it to your season's decorations. The pagan history of Thanksgiving festival can be traced even further back in time. Look into the scriptures to see the early trappings of this copycat day of offering and thanks at the time of harvest. Although Israel's King David was completely faithful to Yahweh throughout his life, his son, King Solomon, built towers for the worship of false gods during the later years of his life. This act of pagan worship was to be punished by Yahweh. 1 Kings 11:11 through 13.
Wherefore Yahweh said unto Solomon, Thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes. I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. But I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen.
Because of King Solomon's disobedience, upon his death, his son Rehoboam became king. But Yahweh allowed the nation of Israel to become split into two houses, one governed by King Solomon's son, King Rehoboam, and one governed by King Solomon's servant, King Jeroboam. This later led to the creation of a pagan festival replicating one of Yah's holy days. Yahweh instructed King Solomon's son's rival, Jeroboam, that he would bless him and his reign as the king of Israel if he kept Yahweh's law. 1 Kings 11:38.
And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and wilt walk in my ways, that I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and I will give Israel unto thee.
King Jeroboam's faith, however, was weak. He feared that the Israelites would return to King Rehoboam if they kept Yahweh's ordained holy day feasts in Jerusalem. Therefore, he created a pagan festival that was exactly 1 month to the day after the feast that Yahweh had already ordained and built false gods for the people to honor. Yahweh gave his people, the Israelites, 7 annual feasts in which to honor him. The Feast of Tabernacles, which is also called the Feast of Ingathering, is one of these feasts. This feast was sanctioned by Yahweh to be celebrated on the 15th day of the Hebrew 7th month, which falls in the modern calendar usually during the month of October. Leviticus 23:33.
And Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto Yahweh.
King Jeroboam set up a pagan festival to replace Yahweh's holy day in the 7th month. This festival was set up in the Hebrew 8th month instead, corresponding to the modern month of November. 1 Kings 12:32 through 33.
And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves which he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel. And he offered upon the altar and burnt incense.
2 Chronicles 11:15.
And Jeroboam ordained his priests for the high places, and for the devils, and for the calves which he had made.
Surely it is amazing to consider that the pagan festival that Jeroboam created to trick the Israelites into remaining under his reign so many centuries ago still haunts us to this day. Everything that we need to do and everything that we should do is written in the scriptures. Yahweh set aside times for our people to give thanks to him, the creator of all things, not to minor pagan gods over only harvest or fertility or the sun, we must remember that these things are only creations. They were made by the Most High, the Creator of all things. Both the Feast of First Fruits and the Feast of Tabernacles, also called the Feast of Ingathering, share aspects of thanking Yahweh for His bountiful harvest, both literally from the fields and non-literally for the righteous men of Israel, His first fruits, and most importantly, His Son, Yeshua, His first fruits of men. Nehemiah 12:46.
For in the days of David and Asaph of old, there were chief of the singers and songs of praise and thanksgiving unto Elohim.
Exodus 23:16.
And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field.
Exodus 34:22.
And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end.
1 Corinthians 15:20.
But now is Christ risen from the dead, and become the first fruits of them that slept.
Leviticus 7:12.
If he offer it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanksgiving unleavened cakes mingled with oil, and unleavened wafers anointed with oil, and cakes mingled with oil of fine flour fried.
Be not confused. Thanksgiving is a pagan holiday. It is not a patriotic day.
Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Surface. We're filming here live from the studios of the Cultural Center of NCCI, and today's topic is Pagan Origins of Thanksgiving. I'm your host, Dawid Ben Israel, and I'm joined by Sister Johanna Bat Israel. Welcome.
Thank you.
Many of you hopefully have just seen the presentation that just ended, and talked a little bit about Thanksgiving, which is just passed, and many people still have fresh memories of turkey, ham, fixins, and desserts. But according to the presentation, it seems that the foods that were talked about and the day itself is full of many pagan rituals. And so I wanted you to just talk a little bit about the significance of the foods that are associated with Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. Just like many of the pagan holidays that are set aside, the actual foods are dedications to certain gods, to certain pagan gods. And with this particular one, you could not have Thanksgiving without the turkey. And in saying that, it's more so a fowl, a whole fowl. It has to be a complete bird that's sitting on the table. Regardless of how large or small the family gathering is, you must have a whole fowl. And these days and times, most people don't actually have the carving and so forth on a daily basis. But on this one day throughout the year, you will have the carving of this fowl. And that fowl is representative of that particular, for that deity. In addition to that, like you spoke with the ham and so forth, the swine, just like we spoke in the previous presentation, the swine is also a dedication to these pagan gods. The swine it always slaps directly against what Yahweh has set aside. Swine is an abomination. Swine is such an abomination that his people, Yah's people, are not even allowed to touch the carcass of this animal, much less to eat it. So it's beyond, it's truly an abomination for us to actually partake of the food, of this particular food, and the fact that it's being dedicated to gods.
Okay, and you mentioned now that it was the uncarved, uncut, full version of this fowl, but I've actually remember in times past having seen in pictures that the actual ham was actually a full pig or a full pig's head that was presented as well. Well, oftentimes you'd see a pig with an apple in the mouth or something.
Right.
Once again, is it significant in some way that is that like part of an unblemished a sacrifice?
It is a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice to these pagan gods. The same way, like you stated, because, just like we spoke before, because it's an imitation of Yahweh's feast. Again, and when we give something to Yahweh, we dedicate something to Yahweh, a sacrifice to Yahweh in the scriptures, you'll see that it is unblemished. So just like in that same sense, when we're speaking about this kind of sacrifice to these pagan deities, then yes, it is a full, it is the actual full product. It's the full turkey or the full ham or what have you, the full pig, and particularly roasted pig. We definitely spoke about those roasted pigs that were done in ancient times for this particular feast.
All right. Well, interestingly enough, you mentioned that according to the scripture, it's an abomination for Israelite people, Hebrew people, people of knowledge, to even touch the carcass or the body of a pig. But at the same respect, Thanksgiving is well known for the sports associated with it, as you said in your presentation, and the biggest sport is the pig skin, which football was usually called. What is it about sports and the event of the sporting during Thanksgiving, which has become so synonymous with the celebration?
Well, the fact that the sports is connected with Thanksgiving so tightly is because the same ancient traditions, traditions, particularly in your Roman times and so forth, during this time, whenever they had these type of pagan festivities, specifically this one, what would happen is you would have the connection of all sorts of chariot racings and other types of activities that were all sports based. And if you go back to even the Olympics and so forth, and the early origins of the Olympics, you'll see a lot of these same types of sports, and be it running or track or any of those sorts of things, it's connected with the worship of these pagan deities.
So in the Roman times, it was the kings or the ruling class that would have these people performing before them. This was their entertainment during their meals, so to speak. Even before television times, they still wanted to be entertained.
Absolutely. And the same thing, just like you stated. Today, we're still doing it. As soon as you finish your meal, same as they, you go, everyone goes into the den or to whichever room the television's in, and you sit and you enjoy the football. But like you stated, the pigskin, this same pigskin in actual professional ball, I believe it is actually made of pig.
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore,
Thank
okay.
goodness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gave way to the cow.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But truly, yes, it's the same type of setup that was previously done. Nothing changed. Just like we spoke before, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything in Thanksgiving that has been done previously is still being done. And the thing about Thanksgiving, that particular festival, and most everyone believes that this festival truly is one of a patriotic festival and nothing to do with any particular religion, which is why it's the most famously celebrated one, specifically here in America, but also throughout the world, because you'll find Muslims celebrating it, you'll find Hindus celebrating it, you'll certainly find Christians celebrating it. Everyone celebrates this festival because everyone thinks it's removed from any particular God, and that's where it's such a, it's certainly it's a guise over people's eyes.
So in essence, the society actually makes it easy to celebrate Thanksgiving. I mean, because that's one of the few holidays in the year where you actually get 2 days off. I mean, so it kind of, the getting together of the family. You mentioned in your presentation the travel. I mean, all of these are elements of creating a day that almost nobody can escape.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're mentioning of the second day that's also allotted to this particular day is that's the most popular celebrated shopping day of the entire year. I think on that particular day you have almost 1/3 of your profits being made by your shopping facilities, because everyone that's the great rush towards the next major pagan celebration, which is Christmas. So this pretty much ushers it in. It was at one point that this was the beginning of it, but these days it seems as though stores have started their decorations and celebrations of Christmas even prior to. You'll see oftentimes right beside a Halloween decoration, you'll see a Christmas decoration these days. But the true ushering in of this next pagan celebration begins without